Good morning, everyone. So we'll call to order right at 10 a.m. So first off, we'll recognize that we're conducting our business today on the territories of the Hoopachisit and Deschamps First Nations, and to recognize and affirm and acknowledge that fact. But that's principally here in a hybrid meeting. So today we have quite a few directors and senior managers in the room, and we'll go around and introduce ourselves there. We also have folks online, and they'll be coming to you from potentially other traditional territories. And from there, we'll move into introductions. Our meetings are live streamed on YouTube, and that's embedded on our website, so you can get there either way. You can pre-register to attend the Zoom call directly as well, and then we could get any comments or questions that way, because I don't think we monitor the comments or chat in YouTube itself. So we'll do introductions inside the boardroom, and then we'll go online. So if you want to start, Cynthia, we'll go around.
Good morning, Cynthia Dick, General Manager of Administrative Services.
Good morning, everyone. Debbie Haggard, appointed councillor from the city of Port Alberni and vice chair of the Regional District Board.
Oh, good morning. Aklama Penny Cote. I am the electoral area director for Sprout Lake, this board. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Mike Sparrow and I'm the director for Cherry Creek.
Good morning, everyone. Mariah Coots for the Hochelaga Tribe Government, Kleko.
Good morning, everyone. Susan Roth for Beaver Creek. Thank you.
Good morning, Daniel Sayana, the CAO for the ACRD. Good morning. And yes, next.
Thank you. And
we want to go up to
we'll go to the
Thank you very much, Alex Dyer, planning manager.
And good morning, Terry Fong, Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning, Jenny Brunn, General Manager of Community Services.
Are you here, Mike? Yeah, you want to use the podium?
Mike Hurd, General Manager of Planning and Development.
And Oklahoma Sayachat, Hishtukshit Lafoet. My name is John Jack. I'm the Chief Counselor for Hoyt and the chair of the board. So we'll head online and we'll just go through the list of folks. Veda, do you want to start?
Veda Siga, Director for Area C Long Beach.
Thank you. And Bob?
Good morning, everyone. Bob Beckett, representing Bamville area.
Thank you. And Tom?
Yeah, good morning. Tom Steer, appointed director of the District of Tofino.
And Fred?
Boyko, electoral area director for Beaufort.
And Lavana?
Lavana Mastrangelo, director for Ucluelet First Nation. Thank you.
Alrighty, and I think that's everyone. So thank you and welcome. So we'll head into the approval of the agenda, and we have an agenda presented to us. It's fairly simple for the committee of the whole, although one of those items is a bit of a beast. So we'll head right into it. Would anyone like to move the agenda as presented? Thank you, Dr. Sparrow, seconded by Dr. Coots. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? A motion carried. Thank you. All right, so that brings us into declarations. I don't think anybody will have declarations of conflict of interest. That brings us into minutes. Would anyone like to move the meeting minutes for committee of the whole meeting dated January 15th, 2025? Thank you, Director Cote, seconded by. Thank you, Director Mastrangelo. Okay, seeing any comments, seeing none, all those in favor, all opposed, a motion carried. Okay, so that brings us into a presentation, which will take probably about an hour and 20 minutes, maybe? No, not even that. Longer. Oh, cold dose of reality. Thank you, Terry. So please take it away.
Thank you. No, an hour and 20 is definitely ambitious. We have actually asked for lunch to be delivered at 12:30 because we're hoping that we'll definitely be wrapped up by 12:30 and then we won't have to interrupt and then reconvene. So really hoping that we can be done by then. I'm just going to share my screen. Great, thank you. So I am Terry Fong. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at the Regional District. And today we will have a number of staff coming up to present the 2025 to 2029 draft financial plan and really kick off our discussions that will be coming over the next 6 weeks. So today's agenda, we will start with an overview of the financial planning process. Then we will talk about the components of the plan by department, starting with the planning, moving on to community services, emergency services, fire services, admin, finishing up with the regional hospital district, and then where we're headed from here. Oops, now it wants to go the wrong way. Okay. So as always, the draft financial plan is a 5-year plan. So current plus 5, we must independently talk about our expenditures, our revenues, and our transfers to and from the reserve accounts. And we must adopt the budget by March 31st of each year. In a regional district format, our services are independent, so we are not allowed to transfer revenues or expenditures between services unless they're providing service to another service. And you're only charged for the services that you are provided. This allocation of expenditures includes salaries and benefits. And we also must balance our budget. We cannot run a deficit.
I wonder how it got out because it was Sorry.
That's okay. All good. So the development of the financial plan is a complicated process, but it begins with looking at the operational costs of our existing services. We also consider the implementation of the 2024 to 2027 ACRD strategic plan and how quickly we want to implement those initiatives. We did the proposed initiative case process again this year, which included looking at all the new kind of initiatives that are coming down the hopper and had that discussion with the board in January. We consider our asset management plans and our attempts to begin to close those infrastructure gaps. And at the end of the day, the goal is to adopt a plan that includes the allocation of resources that will achieve the desired outcomes of the board. But we also try to anticipate any sort of things that we think are changing in the social, environmental, and financial context of today. So following today's draft presentation, we will be kind of headed on a roadshow to numerous places to talk about the plan. So presentations to councils, City of Port Alberni and to Fino. I'm still working to line up a date with Ucluelet, and then headed to Sprout Lake, and Cherry Creek for our official community open houses. But then we are attending some other presentations. We just lined up for the Beaver Creek Beaufort Town Hall and Bamfield Community Affairs. So just slowly getting those lined up. If anyone else is wanting a presentation, please reach out to me. We can definitely attempt to squeeze you in. The calendar is getting very full. So how does the public engage with this plan? There are a number of ways. Sorry, I sound tinny today and I'm not sure how to, I'm just going to keep backing up to engage with the plan. But I think the main would be that all of our board meetings and committee meetings are seen on the YouTube page and on the ACRD website. The financial plan, and each time we release a draft, will be uploaded onto the financial plan page on our website. Always free to call the office and chat with the appropriate staff member, but also could email the budget at acrd.bc.ca with some feedback if you would like. So now just going to pass it to Daniel to talk about the strategic plan focus areas.
Thanks, Terry. Our budget is aligned with the key areas of our strategic plan. As you're aware, we have the 4 key areas: planning for infrastructure, managing our assets, partnerships and communications, and advocacy and service. In these key areas, staff have done a really good job of focusing on those essential areas that add the most value as we move into 2025. I'll just jumping around, but under partnerships and relationship development, there's a lot of work being done, from inclusive regional governance to our emergency services collaboration, whether that be under communications or whether that be under meeting new legislation requirements. There's a number of projects, most of which are grant funded, taking place. We have our 911 addressing, which is the first time the regional district actually has the entire region working together. With one small exception, we have 9 First Nations and 3 municipalities right now collaborating on this initiative so that we can effectively implement the next gen 911 later in 2025. We have areas such as staff training, joint staff training, and even reaching out into work in the area of agriculture. So under partnerships and relationship development, we're directly linked to our objectives 1.2, 3.1, 3.2, and 4.1. Under infrastructure, we have a big focus this year on water. Whether that be in Banfield or Beaver Creek, Long Beach, or even at our airports, water is really one of those essential infrastructure pieces, and you'll see that theme coming back throughout our discussions, our budget discussions today. Specifically, we're linked in here to objective 1.5, 2.3, and 2.4. So if you're looking at the strategic plan, those are the strongest links to the budget this year. Transportation is another one of those key areas. As we know, as the cost of living goes up, people do consider alternatives to vehicle ownership or even vehicle running as fuel prices continue to go up, and thus our transportation infrastructure becomes really important. In the Alberni Valley, you'll be seeing some increases attached to custom transit. We're expanding service there, and on the West Coast, we're seeing our first full year of transit service as well as a transition to BC Transit. So in both areas, key infrastructure for moving people to the services they need is one of the key priorities we've focused on. Of course, setting the stage for success is another one of those key areas that we're talking about. And so our joint planning with OCPs, as well as with various First Nations on their overall plans, is one of those themes that does link back to our strategic plan and is part of the budget. Give it back to Terry.
Great, thank you. So in summary, our total budget is approximately $29.4 million, approximately $200,000 higher than last year. Our tax requisitions about 12.6 million. And in these numbers, I've included the hospital district requisition, because although it's a separate legal entity, it is the same group of taxpayers. So the increase from last year is about 745,000 or 6.29%. In the financial plan, in the letter from Daniel and I, it talks about a number of, I think it's 7.45%, but that was regional district only. And when you bring those numbers of the hospital in, it actually kind of lowers that. So they're not different, they're just calculating different things. And we anticipate about $8 million in grant funding in 2025 for both operational and infrastructure projects. Before I kick it off to the different departments, I did just want to talk about the Canadian Community Building Fund, or the Community Works Fund stream of that fund. Now, this is a fund that actually you'll see throughout numerous services in here. We need to have a more detailed discussion with the electoral area directors regarding the allocation of this fund, because we did get a new funding pot in 2024 from the federal government through the provincial government, so kind of a tripartite agreement. So that will be coming next week, but the recommendations coming from staff have been woven through this financial plan, and you will see them, but I don't necessarily feel like we need to deep dive into that today, because that will definitely be a topic on next week's electoral area directors committee. So that being said, we will pass it over to Alex. Now, the way we've structured this is mostly to kind of get it on the table for you guys and kind of give you a verbal overview of what you're seeing in the package. Definitely welcome questions, but we will be discussing each section of the plan at the appropriate committee meeting. So I'm kind of encouraged not too in-depth of questions that might take us down a massive rabbit hole, if that's all right today, or pose them in the staff response maybe that will bring you back an answer next week. So we do have a lot of information to cover in the next couple of hours here. But we'll be a casual format of kind of a service questions. And yeah, I'll pass it over to Alex. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Again, my name is Alex Dyer. I'm the planning manager. Starting off with the planning department, the best department in the ACRD. So we'll start you off on a highlight here. As always, and I have Mike Erg, the general manager of the department behind me. He will prod me when I get out of line. So getting right into it, regional planning. The regional planning service includes participation from all directors. A function of the regional planning services referral applications from provincial agencies, and application referrals are reviewed for compliance with ACRD bylaws, whether it's a zoning bylaw or the OCP or any other legislative requirements. The most active referrals are the subdivision applications received from the Ministry of Transportation and Transit. 14 of these applications were received in 2024, which continues a downward trend from the high experience in 21 and 22, which is interesting. The number of rezoning applications approved in the electoral areas for residential subdivisions over the past 4 years remains high, and these will often be followed up with subdivision applications. But we do rely on the ministry's referral process as the applications are made directly to them, and there are a number of cost pressures experienced with development right now, but we do expect that most of these applications and these completed rezonings will result in subdivisions. Additional referrals from the province include agricultural land commission applications, which can include subdivision in the ALR, non-farm uses, non-adhering residential uses in the ALR, such as ADUs or houses that are larger than their maximum dwelling size, or approval of accessory residential structures like shops and garages that don't serve an agricultural use, as well as soil deposit and removal from the ALR. There were 3 such applications that were received in 2024. We also get referrals from the province on licenses of occupation on Crown land, liquor licensing, cannabis production and cannabis retail licensing from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, mining and quarrying licensing, water licensing, and then, of course, local government and First Nation referrals on land use policies, regional growth strategies, and OCP amendments from our partners within the region and also our neighboring local governments. So the regional planning service also encompasses the agriculture, the food security, water sustainability, and the climate action initiatives that are led by the regional district. These projects are typically heavily supported by grant funding from the province, and much of this work is led by our sustainability planner. In 2024, the ACRD focused on the continuation of our agricultural support services throughout the region, which is a program that this service has managed for many years now, close to 10 years, I believe. These initiatives include supporting locally focused agricultural and food security projects and initiatives in the region, working within the community to leverage grant funding where we can to collaborate on projects, and participating in a number of food and agriculture focused events. All of this work is guided by the Agricultural Development Committee and the Coastal Foods Roundtable that we have as well. In partnership with North Island College and the Doc Plus Food Hub, the ACRD did administer a grant from the province to sponsor the meat processing program for a second time in spring 2024. This program graduated 8 more students that are qualified in meat processing to support the food industry in the Alberni Valley. The Corporate Energy and Emissions Plan was adopted by the board in August 2024. This plan built upon the emissions inventory that was completed the previous year and recommends actions that can be taken by the ACRD to reduce our energy expenditures within our own assets, including those related to building and transportation, and to consider options for renewable energy. So looking ahead at 2025, there are 2 grant-funded agriculture and food security projects that are currently underway, each supported by a contractor and led by our sustainability planner. The first project is the Agricultural Water Plan Project, which is exploring agricultural water supply and distribution options in the Alberni Valley to help promote both food security and also agricultural business expansion. The second is the Food Security Emergency Planning Project, which is a project that is developing food security assessments in the region. One assessment will be looking at the Alberni Valley, and that'll include a livestock emergency plan for the region, and one assessment looking at the West Coast, including both Long Beach and Banfield. Both of these projects launched in 2024, with the board receiving background reports at the last meeting in January. The projects will involve more engagement, additional collaboration with First Nations, and some additional technical work this year, with final reports expected to come in January 2026. The ACRD is also sponsoring another training program in the community, this time in partnership with North Island College and the Hupesheshet First Nation, to host a greenhouse propagation and production training program, I guess is the name, that aims to supply the labor market with skilled greenhouse workers. And the picture we have here is the greenhouse that's on the Hupesheshet farm. So we look forward to do that in the spring here upcoming. The regional district will also be completing building energy audits for ACRD owned facilities, which is one of the action items that is recommended in the corporate climate action plan. The audits will investigate where energy savings can be had and the approximate cost to realizing those. And finally, the ACRD will also be seeking funding and partnership opportunities to engage in a region-wide community climate action plan that we anticipate will be starting in 2026. And I just want to highlight that all of these projects are supported by grant funding, and in many cases 100% grant funding. So the regional district or the regional planning service has the flexibility to tackle these challenges and opportunities as they arise throughout the year, and as highlighted by the board and your committees. And the ability to leverage grant funding and in collaboration with community partners to lead these initiatives is a highlight of that service, in my opinion. Is there any questions on regional planning?
Dr. Cote?
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks for this presentation. Lots of work here. Congratulations to staff for bringing all of this together. I have a question around the trainings. I was thinking meat processing and greenhouse worker training. Is there jobs at the end of these training sessions that people can have within our community? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've done the meat training program twice. We've done a seafood processing, we've done a market gardener, and then the greenhouse training will be upcoming. These are grant programs that come from the province that are focused on returning people to work and to create new employment opportunities for people. So while there is no specific job that they will walk into, they have the skills and the training. And I do know that in some cases with the meat processing, for example, we're working with local businesses that we're looking for employees. So don't have any stats on what the follow-up from that is, but I know it puts people on the right foot to seek employment. And I also will highlight that those programs are fully funded. So that's full tuition and housing supports and daycare supports for people to attend.
I do. I have another question regarding the agriculture water plan. Can you expand a little bit more on that? How far are we into it? I know it's a long-term plan. And I know that I've had questions regarding drought within the valley, and are we going to be addressing any of that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So the plan right now, we just completed the background research report on it. So they've been looking at all of the policy work that the regional district has been involved in, that the former Beaver Creek Improvement District has completed prior to that. So we have all that baseline information, and we've connected with the producers and the First Nations in the region. The next step is more targeted engagement with those groups. So they'll be working with the producers themselves to talk about needs, and we'll be fleshing out some of the options for supplying more agricultural water and you know the different costs associated with distributing that, whether it's a place to fill up or whether it's a community water license that would be held by the regional district or an actual irrigation district. So we'll be looking into more of that, and the board will be hearing more on that in the next year.
Okay, I have Director Steer next.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, and it keeps flashing on my screen that my internet is unstable. I don't know if it's me or the internet, but just if I do get out, it's because of my internet connection. Thank you, Alex, for the report. And it's gonna unfortunately, you're going to take the beginning of this in terms of the budget conversations that we're going to be having, and regional planning was one of the ones that came up. And it's a general comment to begin with, and then I'll be specific around Tofino's contribution to many of these services, and this one in particular, where and you've heard this song from me before, but we do pay a disproportionately large amount to the shared services that we encounter. And with limited ways to reduce that through the structure that we have for contributions, I have to look at areas where it's an obligation I have to the taxpayers of Tofino, and this is one of the areas that has been flagged and come up in terms of the contribution, and in this case, Tofino this year, the requisition is 38,000 and change. And it is the one area that I'm going to have to look at as to what the contributions that Tofino, in terms of areas that we may want to withdraw our service from that service. And this was one in particular, because when I looked into what we were receiving for those contributions, I just cannot justify it. And maybe if Alex, while I have you there, like if my reading of it and what the contributions, that we're supporting, working with the Tofino Community Food Initiative to support the coastal food roundtables. And then there's some possibility just to comment on issues in the West Coast region. And I'm just going to throw that out there, and because I'm going to be asking for a relook at this, I know for this 2025 year, but then certainly going into the future, this is going to be something that I'll be focusing on. Thank you, and I do apologize, but it is something that we really have to be looking at in Tofino when we're looking at 50% higher than my neighboring community down the road for the same service. And we're paying a very disproportionately higher amount. So without any other recourse, I have to look at those areas that we have to find where I can find savings.
Thanks, Director Steer. I think that's a fair comment. My understanding is that you're going to pay attention to try to get more value out of the program, or is it like looking at not participating? You are muted though.
Yeah, I did freeze there, Chair Jack. I didn't hear any of that. I froze on there. You froze, or
I said it sounded like fair comment, and you shouldn't have to apologize for it. But also, I wanted clarification. Are you looking to try to get more value for Tofino out of the program, or are you looking at potentially reviewing and leaving the program or service?
that would be correct, unless there is a way, and I have talked to Terry in the past about, is there a way to make this a more equitable conversation, and there are very limited possibilities out there, and frankly the few choices that I could see were withdrawing from those ones that we were not seeing direct benefits from, or proportional benefits from, I should say. And so, yes, the answer to your question is we'll be looking at withdrawing from contributions to that service.
Thank you, Director Steer. Any further comments? Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just back with the water issue. I have asked for the regional district to create a water committee going forward, and I think that I'm not sure if this would be where I should be asking for that, or exactly where. Thanks.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if a specific water committee was necessary when we had the Alberni Valley Committee, because it seems like that's a regional kind of conversation between electoral areas in the Alberni Valley and that of and then other areas would have their own conversations. Do you think that it has like utility to have a region-wide water conversation?
Absolutely. I think it's region-wide. I think that Tofino has run out of water in the past. Every area has an issue with water. And I think that it's important that we identify what our abilities are and how we can work together on maintaining good water quality and ability to provide that water going forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Steer, and then I saw Dr. Siga nodding, so I wouldn't mind if you two weigh in.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to Director Cody. We have never run out of water. I just want to make that clear. That's never been the issue. We've had some issues around water, but we've never run out of water.
Okay, that's fair. Director Siga, did you have a comment at all, or were you just agreeing?
Yeah, I would have to agree with Director Cote that I think the water committee needs to be broadened. Like, I'm listening to the plans for the agricultural water plan project, but hopefully in future we will also need an agricultural water plan for the West Coast as well, given that we're going to be having all of this great soil provided. And we're all taking from the same watersheds. And I am really, really concerned about the septic systems, as I've expressed before, and the contamination of our water supplies. So I think we should set a regional water committee and work in collaboration with Clayoquot Biosphere Trust, who have also already done a lot of work on the watersheds and waterways.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a few options available to us in regards to water, because if water is such a strategic conversation across the entire region, I would argue that maybe we make it something that's inhabited by the board itself, and we have committees the whole devoted to talking about water in a strategic way. And then what can happen is you can have sub-regional conversations, West Coast, Bamfield, Huayet, Alberni Valley, and beyond. And then those can feed into a wider committee of the whole. So having a dedicated committee can be a thing, but it kind of parallels what a committee of the whole could do. But if we just make sure that we have maybe quarterly committee of the whole meetings about water specifically, that might cover it off without having to create a whole nother committee, which may or may not be worthwhile. My only concern, and I think this may be what your concern might be, would be just making sure people who have interests in those water conversations, make sure they come to the committee the whole meeting. So I don't want to like say, no, we shouldn't have a committee, but it does seem like this is something that's important to everyone on the board. So we would just have to structure it in a way that makes sense. Is that something that can be done just under the auspices of general administration, or should we put aside some other funding to do that within general admin? Like, I'll go to Daniel and then I'll go to Susan.
I was just making notes, and it's something that we'll take back to our table and look at how we would fund it, but also how we want to structure those discussions, right? So if it's a matter of pulling in other entities and collecting information, who's doing that data collection and synthesis and whatnot. And so we'll take it back to the staff table and come back with a number and where we think the number should sit.
Go ahead, Director Roth.
Yeah, Beaver Creek already has a water committee and an advisory board. It just seems like it would be something that would slow it down. So I like it the way it is. It's working well for us to just maintain things the way they are. Thank you.
Thanks. I think the conversation isn't to horn in on like individual members drinking water conversation. I think it's more strategic water access, surface water, subsurface, agricultural, industrial, like the kind of top-down stuff. So it would be important for participation to happen at least at your level, maybe not bringing those folks in unless they want to. And then we can save at least some time and some money in the doing of it. I would want to make sure that the agricultural concerns of Beaver Creek are represented alongside the domestic use. I don't know what the term is, but I think if we do it just through the board for now, and then we figure out if we need something specifically devoted, then at least we're saving the administrative burden of a whole other committee for now. Yeah. Any further comments? Okay, I can commit. I think the idea would be to at least have quarterly conversations about water until we understand where we're going. And that may go in the direction of a committee or a working group. But I think what it may end up doing is involving the board members as well as maybe non-treaty First Nations as well, because they'll have input in regards to water, because there are rights there that are undefined. Thank you, Alex.
No, thank you for that. That's helpful discussion. And I will highlight that we have a Council for Agricultural Water Supply that's a focus group that's helping to guide that water plan project. So there could be some synergies there for sure. I want to move on to rural planning. So the rural planning service provides development planning for all electoral areas in the ACRD, and that's regulated under Part 14 of the Local Government Act. Each of the electoral areas participate in this service. The management of development applications and of inquiries from the public is the primary day-to-day focus in rural planning, but and I will highlight the development applications, but first wanted to highlight some of the project work that was completed last year and look ahead at what we're working on in terms of planning policy work in 2025. So in January 2024, the board directed that the regional district proceed with the comprehensive updates of the 6 electoral area OCPs over a multi-year process. That project is now underway with the start of the updates in Area C in Long Beach and in Area D in Sproat Lake and the surrounding areas. There are communication and engagement plans that have been completed and background research reports for those OCPs as well. The area advisory planning commissions have provided initial guidance on community visioning, and some initial public engagement has started, mostly in Area C, but we are planning some broader engagement opportunities over the next month and into spring. So that's very exciting for us. We also completed interim housing needs reports for each electoral area, and these were received by the board in December 2024. The reports were required by legislation to be completed by the end of 2024 and included additional reporting requirements on the number of anticipated housing units required for the next 5 to 20 years. There were updates to the ACRD zoning bylaw that were completed to allow secondary suites in all residential zone parcels with no minimum lot size, and that was done to comply with the small scale multi-unit housing legislation that the province brought in. And updates are also made to incorporate the former land use contracts into site specific zoning as well. And again, both of these updates were required by legislation to be completed by June of 2024, which was completed. The Banfield Development Plan is a grant funded project that assessed the capacity for future growth in the Banfield community while considering required servicing and development constraints. The project is expected to be completed in 2025, and we also have some additional grant funding that was received from the province to collaborate with the Huu-ay-aht First Nations on community planning in the Banfield area. So all of this work and this additional engagement will help inform the upcoming Banfield OCP update project. So looking ahead to 2025, the primary focus will continue to be the 2 comprehensive OCP updates that we're currently working on and expect to be finalized in 2026. The project will also look ahead to the updates of the other 4 electoral area OCPs as well. Work is currently underway on more comprehensive housing needs assessments for each area that will build upon the interim reports. The expanded assessments will look at housing needs unique to each area at a more community level rather than a data level, and incorporate more engagement with the area APCs, with the directors, with community members, and with affected agencies and First Nations. And finally, we have the Development Approvals Process Review Project, which is a grant-funded project that is assessing the regional district's development application and building permit application review processes, and will deliver recommendations to help improve practices, increase efficiency, and help drive overall performance improvement in development approval in the region. That project is now underway and will be completed later this year as well. So getting into the applications, just want to highlight the types of applications that we see under Part 14 of the Local Government Act. We have the rezoning applications and OCP amendments, temporary use permits, development variance permits, development permits, and the Board of Variance. So with all of those types of applications, there were 66 such applications received in 2024, which was slightly higher than the number received the previous year and in line with the increased development activity that we've experienced in the region since 2021. A similar level of development activity is anticipated again this year. The review of these development applications includes engaging with the advisory planning commissions on each of these types of applications, with the exceptions of the development permits, which have been delegated to staff and the Board of Variance. There were 29 APC meetings that were held in 2024 across our 6 APCs to seek input on development applications. Zoning bylaw amendments that are not consistent with the official community plan require that public hearings be held, and there were 7 such public hearings held in 2024. The legislation updates from the province have removed the ability to hold a public hearing for residential rezonings that are consistent with OCP policies. So that has reduced the process involved for many of those residential focused rezonings that relate to housing. In 2024, the planning department began updating application status trackers on the website as well. So that provides up-to-date information on the current status of individual rezoning, temporary use permit, and development variance applications, as well as active temporary use permits for short-term rentals. In 2025, we are looking to improve the functionality of these application trackers as well, given the implementation of the updated CityView workspace property database software that the department is now utilizing. So based on current subdivision and rezoning applications that are either under review, waiting on us for review, or waiting on the applicants, there are approximately, give or take, 187 potential new lots that are at the application approval stage. For reference, the interim housing needs reports that we adopted last year estimate an anticipated need of 519 new residential housing units by 2026, calculated from the base year of 2021. So a lot of work to do yet, but there are a number of lots that are working their way through that approval stage. All of this development application work has been guided by our committees, as I mentioned, and the public through 36 different evening meetings, whether that's an APC meeting or a public hearing. We expect that work to continue throughout this year with an increased focus on APC meetings and public engagement that will relate to the OCP updates and the more housing needs report work that we're doing as well. Any questions on rural planning?
Okay, seeing no more questions. Are there any? No questions? Okay, let's move on. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I want to speak a little bit about our bylaw enforcement service. So the planning department provides bylaw enforcement services across all electoral areas with participants depending on the regulatory bylaws. We have zoning bylaw enforcement and unsightly premises bylaw. The two burning bylaws, signs, and soil removal are all applicable to all electoral areas. Additionally, there are individual noise control and dangerous dog bylaws in Sprout Lake, Beaver Creek, and Cherry Creek. Bylaw enforcement staff will respond to zoning and regulatory bylaw infractions on a complaint basis. The bylaw enforcement policy that was adopted by the board in 2021 sets out the framework in which complaints are received and how they are managed by staff. The process intends to promote transparency and accountability in the process while providing a fair and reasonable process for both the complainant and the property owner. In 2024, the regional district received 53 new enforcement files, which is almost exactly in line with what we've received in each of the past 3 years. The board has adopted the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, which provides a procedure for issuing tickets for zoning bylaw infractions at the moment. The bylaw notice process provides that additional tool for the regional district to see compliance on zoning bylaw contraventions, although we will highlight that it's not commonly utilized. Many of these cases have been resolved through communication with the property owner and through coordinating with other agencies, which is always the preferred course of action for us. Bylaw enforcement officer will liaise with regulatory agencies to share information, to support their enforcement efforts and to support our own, and to provide advice to complainants and residents alike. So those agencies that we most often work with and have a good connection with are Island Health, Ministry of Transportation, the RCMP, the Conservation Officer Service, and DFO and environmental protection agencies as well. We find that this relationship building and this coordination of efforts, I guess, will provide the most effective service for us. There are a couple projects we'll be focusing on in 2025. That includes the review of the outdoor burning bylaw with the intent to better align with the provincial regulations, including allowing open burning during the winter months where supported by the province and provided the venting index is favorable, and focusing enforcement efforts on the poor venting days where burning should not be occurring. Another project will be to review the animal control services provided in the region to seek some partnership opportunities to provide for more effective and efficient dangerous dog enforcement processes. That individual service area model is challenging given the current costs that we are experiencing. Any questions on bylaw enforcement?
Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. At the moment, do we have an animal bylaw contract?
Through the chair. So we have a contractor that we use. We don't have them on a standby contract. The costs have escalated substantially and it makes it more challenging to deal with these issues if needed, which is the onus for looking into how we actually effectively manage the service. The complaints are always received here at the office and we'll have our bylaw enforcement officer initiate contact with the property owner, but they're not trained to be the dog catchers. So it is an issue that will need to be resolved.
So the animal control service is for dangerous dogs only. So other animals like when the Dyson water buffalo get out, that has nothing to do with that. Thanks.
No, thank you. That's a good question because roaming livestock has come up multiple times in my time here, but no, it is only to do with the dangerous dogs, and the ACRD does not have any regulation for dogs at large or dog licensing or anything like that. So it's strictly the dangerous dogs where we've received a complaint about it.
I was going to say field puppies. Would cows and buffalo be handled by a different thing though, or is that?
Yeah, the issue has come up before, and there is no agency that'll come out and deal with that. I know the experiences we've had, it's been a local farmer who's helped us out, but there was an incident where a vehicle had crashed into a cow on a Beaver Creek Road years ago, and they didn't have insurance, and the insurance wasn't gonna cover them. So we got involved at the time, but livestock roaming is not something that's usually regulated here on the island. Some of the northern interior regional districts will look into that, but haven't really had the need for that in my experience.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Okay, go ahead, Director Sparrow and then Director Haggard.
As far as the dangerous dog thing goes, I remember watching the news a while ago, somebody down island got attacked by a dog that came out of the yard and it wasn't covered under the dangerous dog because of some bylaw regulation. Hopefully our bylaws are such that if a person gets attacked by a house, talking about a house, that we are covered. And also, we're paying money for a service we don't really have just yet. So that's kind of annoying, but the noise control at Cherry Creek has gone up 30%. Can you tell me why it would go up 30%?
I can jump in on that. So it just depends on year over year and if there's any legal costs associated with investigations that have occurred or letters. So there was, I think, some activity in there. I'll just have to double check, but it also might have been a use of surplus from the prior year because that also impacts us as well. I'll just quickly pull it up. Yeah, so there was a drop in the surplus amount from the previous year, but there was also some bylaw enforcement charges this year. So in the previous year, there wasn't as much work done in the service. So small amount, but does fluctuate from year to year based on the number of calls and complaints and activity in the service.
Thank you. Director Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering why the ACRD does not contract with the SPCA for dangerous dogs and other services.
Yeah, no, thank you. We have had lots of discussions with the SPCA in the past. They have a model that in our experience in the past hasn't fit well with what our service budget limits are and the service that we wish to provide. But I would like to engage with them again and look at ways to partner with our member municipalities and the First Nations in the region as well, because I know there's some interest in doing that. So that is the work that we'll be doing this year.
Thank you. Director Cote.
Thank you. In the past, we did look at a contract with the SPCA. It was going to be over $100,000. They wanted us to buy a vehicle for them and be extra staffing, and they would be on call all the time. Compared to what the calls are that were needed, we just couldn't verify, go along with buying a new vehicle and the cost of, it was at that time, it was over $100,000. Thanks.
So calls for service for bylaw enforcement have gone up though, have they not? Is it mostly in regards to noise or animal control, or is it just all over the map?
Yeah, they're mostly zoning bylaw infractions. There were a number of dangerous dog calls in the last year that we responded to. So yeah, there's a large number across the map, and what our fear is that we have either a number of dangerous dog issues or one significant dangerous dog issue that we don't have, or we have limited ability to deal with effectively with the budgets we have. So that's what we'll be looking at over the next year.
All right, thank you. Any further comments or questions on bylaw enforcement? Huayet may follow up on animal control at some point. Thank you.
Absolutely. And my last slide here, I want to talk about building inspection. Building inspection service administers building permit applications in all of the electoral areas. This involves all aspects of the building approval process regulated by the province and by our ACRD building bylaw, including inspections for both building and plumbing. And just for reference on the amount of work that this can entail, the ACRD building inspectors completed 437 inspections on active building permits in 2024. The building inspectors will also enforce the provisions of the building bylaw where needed to see compliance with the permitting requirements. The service offers wet inspections for wood stoves in the electoral areas and inspection support for First Nations governments and for the city of Port Alberni on an as-needed basis under current contracts. The ACRD can also provide level 3 building inspection service for the more complex mixed use and industrial buildings, which is a benefit to our partners in the region. In 2024, the region experienced increased building activity over the previous year. We had 123 building permits issued for a total construction value of 28.6 million, which is the highest annual construction value that we've ever experienced here in the regional district. This includes building permits that were issued for 39 new homes across the region, in the electoral areas across the region. In 2023, the department added part-time administrative support to improve operational efficiency and help streamline the permit application review where possible, and to allow the building inspectors to focus on the technical aspects of their work, and that's going well. Looking ahead to 2025, a similar level of building activity is anticipated. There are obviously a number of external factors to the market, but with the new lots at the approval stage that I highlighted before, the secondary suites that are now permitted on all residential lots, and housing approval and flexibility mandated by the province, there certainly is the potential for increased building experienced in 2025. In March 2025, there will be further updates to the BC Building Code that will come into effect, including additional seismic design requirements, adaptable dwelling requirements, and the implementation of a minimum level 1 of the zero carbon step code for all new dwellings. These updates will impact the building inspector workload as they consider the impacts on new building, and also communicate that with the builders and the developers and the homeowners in the community. The department will consider a building bylaw update later in 2025 that will align with this updated building code, and also to help implement the efficiency recommendations that we expect to come out of the development approval process review project that is now underway. Any questions on building?
Dr. Sparrow and then Dr. Beckett.
Thank you. So the building permit applications, are the costs in line with what is cost for inspections, or we need to look at those in 2025 to revise them to allow them to meet parity?
Thank you. Yeah, the building permit fees were increased a couple of years ago, or the way we calculate the value was increased, so that has resulted in increased revenue. Part of that development approval process review, they are looking at neighboring regional districts and municipalities and comparable regions to look at where our costs are aligned. It is not a fee for service relationship for sure. It has been subsidized by tax requisition. So we will look to recommend some changes to that in the future if that's what the recommendation will come out of this process review. But there are options to do that for sure.
Dr. Beckett, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to follow up because that's with Director Sparrow's question, because that's exactly what I was interested in pursuing. And Alex, you've touched on it. I'm just wondering how close we are, and maybe this is a question to be directed to Terry, but how close are we to being, cost neutral on it? What are other municipalities and regional governments doing? Are they cost neutral, or in fact, are they ensuring that the fees, are actually contributing to a regional government or community's budget?
Thank you. A couple things here. So there was actually about $49,000 additional revenue that we were not able to recognize in 2024 because of a new public sector accounting board standard that has to now link our performance obligations to our revenues. So we used to recognize a building permit's total revenue cost the day we received it, which there's a lot of work to be done on a building permit before we issue it and they pay. But there's also multiple inspections, I think on average 9 inspections that occur after a building permit is issued. So now we have to defer some of that revenue to recognize it over time as the building inspectors are performing those inspections. So that has had an impact on the service. We did anticipate that impact because we knew it was coming. So we had been conservative in our revenue estimates last year. The other area that this hit was also rural planning, because it's the same process with our development applications as well. And I think it was close to that same $49,000 mark as well. In terms of cost neutral service, super challenging because it's not something we overly know what the market's going to look like in the coming year. We have had years where we have been able to drop the requisition to get other projects done in the same kind of electoral area group. I would say it's a balancing act, and across the province, from my understanding, is how much are you wanting to encourage development in your area, and how much are you wanting to be cost recovery. So I would say 5-7 years ago at the regional district had a discussion about this, probably a couple of years before we updated the fees, and it really was a discussion of how much encouragement do we want of development in our area, and do we want to keep those fees at a rate. So definitely something we could look at. I know that Alex and Mike and I have talked about that development approval process and kind of looking at what comes out of that, and then maybe kind of coming back with some of those reviews afterwards. But yeah, again, it's tricky. Like even like a January indication of building permit applications doesn't indicate what the year looks like. So we're guessing that a tariff talk year, we're going to see some slowdowns in construction this year. But we also know that there's a huge demand for housing. So there's kind of both avenue of it. So we just try to take our best guess and make our tax requisition not spike in valley and spike in valley. So trying to make that consistent where we can. I hope that answers your question, Director Beckett.
Okay, it looks like it did. Are there any other comments or follow-ups? Okay, thank you, Alex.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I'm General Manager of Community Services, Jenny Brunn. And because Alex claimed best department and was up first, I guess we will be the most dynamic department because we do have a lot of services, some of them very small, some of them very big. I'll be starting with solid waste, and then we'll have a few other staff being presenting as well. Excellent. Okay. So our solid waste service, we essentially have 2 services, one for the West Coast and one for the Alberni Valley and Bamfield area. Each of those services is responsible to manage the nuance of disposal versus diversion within the community. We have the landfills, we have curbside collection contracts and environmental management systems, and that is throughout the region. The funding of this service is majority through tipping fees. So we do have taxation, but it is relatively small in both of the services. And we also get recoveries from a lot of our recycling, steel, and other things that we sell. So that is a benefit to us in the region. The big highlights for both services is waste education. We do this throughout the region. So we have our Let's Talk Trash contractor who's in their second year now of providing this service. And they're going to be focusing on mentorship and community champions, as well as basically increased outreach across all of the communities through the school district and social media. We did a lot of work on the solid waste management plan in the last year. So we were able to basically set up the guiding principles, our goals, targets, and then draft strategies moving forward. We've just wrapped up phase 2 of our public engagement in the fall, and we'll be providing a detailed report to the board at a committee of the whole meeting coming up soon. So we'll give more information on that and next steps moving forward. In the last year, we also did a 2-phase tipping fee increase, and that was basically to try and make sure that we're being financially sustainable in both of these services. Specifically in the Alberni Valley waste management sector, we have a service that includes the Alberni Valley landfill, which is now the Sort and Go facility. We've got curbside collection in Beaver Creek, as well as our First Nation communities, the Banfield transfer station, and we do waste hauling in Banfield, and then we have our Third Avenue depot. As I mentioned, the majority of this service is funded through our tipping fees and other recoveries through the sale of recyclables. The taxes, we have remained stable. So we did an increase last year in Banfield, and we've kept that stable at $100,000. And there's a minor increase of 1% for the Alberni Valley, bringing that up to $87,000 and a bit. As Terry had mentioned about a tariff year, there is some future uncertainty. So garbage and the economy are strongly linked. And we've really considered that when building this budget this year, and we've been very conservative in our estimates. You always know when the economy is doing well because you get a lot of garbage coming into the landfill. But consequently, we can't be assuming that we're going to have those revenues generated. And we did see that on the West Coast dropping a bit last year. And so we're being very cautious with our estimates. This past year, we also did a lot of work with our landfill working group with the Sechot First Nation. We're also going to have a detailed report coming to the Alberni Valley and Banfield Committee to talk more about what we've been doing and what the plan is moving forward. Some of the key projects for this service will be to continue to work on that. And we're also going to be spending a bit of time going to the Banfield Services Committee and talking about Banfield, because one of the challenges is the more rural you get, the higher cost you see over a small population. And because we can't charge tipping fees, and that is fundamentally trying to be cost recovery within that small community, we're going to be looking at different ways that we can reduce or make more cost efficiencies. So for this year, we think we're okay, but we're going to look at options to continue to make that service run better. On the West Coast, we essentially are operating the West Coast landfill, and we recently did an expansion of our curbside collection to include 3-stream and into our First Nation communities, which is excellent. And that service expansion was at the landfill as well. So we have a full year of organics processing, which has resulted in Class A certified compost, which we're going to be promoting all spring. If you're interested, come see me afterwards. And we've also started taking biosolids from the district of Tofino in the fall. And so we're just working on what that looks like. And again, processing on site. We'll be maintaining the biosolids on site as cover material, but we're still working out exactly how we're moving through that. And even just coming into operations, because it was a massive expansion on that site and what we've been doing from landfilling to now also processing organics. We are seeing, again, the uncertainty, and I think this is highlighted here. The West Coast is such a fascinating service when you look at solid waste in general, because we have a huge tourist population, and so the equivalent population that we see there is much higher than the actual population. So for us, it's a matter of balancing that tourism influx of waste that we see both managing it effectively to make sure that they're all diverting and not filling up the landfill unnecessarily, but then also making sure that the burden of finances is appropriately spread out. So in this upcoming year, that will be one of the things we're going to look at, is specifically options to encourage, incentivize, and disincentivize the landfilling and or organics diversion, now that we have the ability to process organics, and just getting more of those commercial businesses on board. We also want to look at updating our DOCP. Now, that's a design, operation, and closure plan for the landfill. And because we've had so much change happen recently at the landfill, it's time for us to look at that and see what the future looks like to make sure that the landfill is operating. We have a lot of increased regulations that we're having to look at for the future in solid waste. So that's important, and it's just really good timing. We've had some bear interactions on the West Coast, and so we're looking at programs to address that. We have switched out a lot of carabiners and done other things, but I think it will require a little more attention. And we're going to be doing an upgrade of our power there, because right now we're still operating on generator. So that's that last piece to make sure that the organics is operating effectively. Oh, and I'm going to stop for any questions before I hand water systems over.
Thank you. Director Steer, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Much appreciated on the West Coast Waste Management, as you know, passion project, and the incredible amount of work that's been done out on the West Coast here. I just had, it's kind of a technical question. I was just curious because I didn't fully understand. In the budget, in the operating budget under expenses on line 215, there was on closure and post-closure fund contributions, we had budgeted 100, and the actual amount was 224,000. And I'm just wondering maybe if you could explain why that was, and I should know, but I don't. So thank you.
I'll give it a shot, and if Terry says I'm wrong. So we actually, this is all thanks to your excellent finance department. We've had really good returns on investment that were higher than expected. So that is within the reserve account. The money that's in there is generating more money. And so it's just getting put in through, and so it's an in and out, but it's basically return on investment. Would that be accurate, Terry? Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up is Dr. Boyko. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering what we're doing to focus on the large polluters, the industrial, commercial, the high-rise residentials, as opposed to just focusing on let's toss trash to the rural residents. They are not necessarily the source of the problem, but what are we doing to focus on the large producers of waste and what we can do to help that? And secondly, how are we talking to the BC government about increasing recycling available options for commercial things? Thank you.
Excellent questions. And I think it is true that we often hear more about residential because both the education campaigns are very widespread. And so we're often talking about that and focusing on that, but they are not the only producers. And often the commercial sector, as I mentioned, specifically on the West Coast, can be one of the bigger contributors. So thank you for highlighting that. And that is something that we're going to be working on. When it comes to those, we really find that we need to be working one-on-one with those people and also working with our partners who are the haulers and getting those partnerships, because it can be the intermediate hauler who can be making the most impact on changing those, because we're not collecting from the haulers, right? So we are regulating activity at the landfill and we're the back end, but between us and those commercial producers is the haulers. And so we're starting to work more with them on ideas and interests that we can do that, specifically in the Alberni Valley, and incentivizing, again, organics diversion and setting up those systems where we can. And also then talking directly with some of the bigger producers to see what are their barriers to making those changes besides just financial. And one of the ways we are doing it is we continue to increase costs so that it is representative of the cost for us to be landfilling that material versus composting it or recycling it. Yes, the other side of that is that you highlight that a lot of the regulation for recycling comes from the province. That's not within our purview. So if we want to see more materials get into the stewardship program, mattresses would be a good example, then we continue to have to put pressure on the province to make those changes. We are engaged with the province, providing our feedback along with all the other regional districts and trying to lobby them to move that forward. They have committed to that. It feels like it's a lot slower than they had originally promised. And mattresses is one of the highlights for us because the Alberni Valley is actually leading the way with the mattress recycles program and we're basically taking mattresses from other areas on the island and doing that processing here. A lot of it is because they have not yet put that upfront fee on mattresses when you buy them. And so there has been a commitment from the province to do that so that it will be set up as a stewardship program. But we continue to pick at that and lobby for those changes through UBCM and other ways.
Thank you. Dr. Haggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jenny, in the city, we do have a lot of multifamily residential dwellings, so I would welcome the conversation on how we can better get those multifamily residential units to do better recycling and set up something with them. So I'd welcome to have those conversations with you.
If anyone speaks German, maybe we can see what the Austrians do. Apparently they're pretty good. I did have a question. I don't know if it's for Jenny or for Tom. With the solid waste origin being from tourism, especially in the summer months, are there any things that the District of Tofino does in order to can maybe collect a fee or something from the primary benefactors, the people who are beneficiaries of tourism? So is there like an eco fee or anything that's being charged locally for lodges and hotels and that sort of thing to help deal with that? It seems like something that we might be able to institute, at least in Huu-ay-aht operations, to help with the Bamfield side of things, but I don't know what other types of systems are being adopted. Maybe it's a question for Tom.
Yeah, the short answer, Chair Jock, through the chair, the short answer is no. But what we do have, and I'm not sure how it could relate to those types of, well, other than the education that goes along with those conversations at the ACRD, but specifically with the municipality, as I'm sure you're aware, we do collect the old bed tax, the MRDT. And within that, our destination marketing organization, there may be some conversations that could be brought forward there to engage. And I think Jenny's correct in terms of some of the issues on the West Coast. We're working directly with those individual operators may be the best solution, and there may be the conduit through that may be the destination marketing organization such as Tourism Tofino. But the short answer is no. I know certainly Tlaloque'it First Nation, and they have a stewardship fee through the Tribal Parks Alliance, but it's mostly centered on their Guardian program and the stewardship of the land base, which we could tie directly in there in some ways, but as it stands, no is the answer. Unless Jenny knows something I don't know.
No, and it is a unique challenge for us at the regional district because we don't have different categories for taxation. So we can't target through taxation in the commercial sector. One thing that we will be bringing to the West Coast Committee is a discussion around the idea of just setting a different fee at the landfill. So if your source is commercial, we can set differential rates. And that's something we're going to be looking at this year.
Okay. Yeah, just from a Huu-ay-aht perspective, we were looking at some sort of eco fee program, but it had to be voluntary, and that went over like a lead balloon. So, but one thing that ended up being interesting is that treaty nations have lawmaking authority akin to a province. So there may be things that we'd be able to do in our treaty nations, as limited as our area is in regards to addressing this the right way. It does seem like, to address Director Boyko's concern, I think we need to actually start thinking on what our strategy is going to be moving forward on lobbying with the ABICC, with the UBCM, but specifically with the provincial decision makers now that it seems like everything's calmed down in regards to mandates and the election and so on and so forth. So this is probably a time to start thinking on, okay, province, what is your actual plan for ICI? Because that's a huge impact, especially in smaller communities. So yeah, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Jenny, any further comments or questions?
No, I think that's great. I will pass it over to Eddie to talk about our water.
So before Eddie comes up, let's have a quick 5-minute break. because it's been an hour and a bit and people are already getting up. So thank you. So let's get back at, we'll just make it 11:20. Thanks. All right, folks, welcome back. I'd like to thank Eddie for his patience. And we'll get right into the next item on the presentation. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. We'll jump into the potable water systems now. So we'll take you through Beaver Creek, Millstream, and the Banfield water system. First of all, we'll touch on a couple of the pictures here up on the left. You see this was a leak, a water main break that took place 2 Sundays ago on Smith Road. Absolutely perfect break. If you could draw one up, that would be it. The guys came in, they put a coupling over it. It was done. It was nice and quick. You see, that's Matt McLeod, our water utilities lead hand. Does not like his picture taken. In contrast, though, we had a break on Sunday night on Saunders Road, and it was about a 3-inch chunk of AC main, and it was the exact opposite of that. So that one was much more involved, but the guys got out there quick, and our contractors got out there quick and got the job done. So that's kind of what we do. We get out there when there's a system, and we make sure the water continues for the people that need it. 2024, so we replaced a section of Smith Road, not the section that burst on Sunday night, thankfully. We also did phase 1. We have a 4-phase SCADA upgrade at our 4 pump houses. So we did phase 1 at the Strick Road pump house. The GIS condition assessment was completed by our asset management team. Fantastic work there. And then we had Pacific Leak Locators come out to do some leak detection work within the system. It was really actually quite a benefit. They found 3 sizable repairs done and within the system, and that's kind of highlights the importance of that leak detection and ensures we don't lose a lot of water. Losing water is losing money. So we want to kind of keep that unaccounted for water loss down. That's one of our potable water goals. 2025, we continue on with our water main replacement projects. We have the Lower Kitts Road water main replacement. Came in under budget, which is fantastic. Continuing with our strategy of getting those tenders out in late year, early the next year, to ensure that we can allow contractors to bid over an entire year. So they can kind of slot in the work, make sure they have work for their crews over an entire year. So it's kind of a win-win there. We're continuing, as I mentioned, with phase 2 of the SCADA upgrades at the North Reservoir Pump House. We have our meter reading software is a little bit out of date. So we have a grant application out for potentially replacing this through a grant, and there'll be more to that coming at the board meeting today. If not, our meter reading software is currently end of life, so we'll be looking at replacing that. Another big item that will come to a head in May, we should get the final draft report of our alternative water source feasibility study and water treatment options. Currently, we have received back the draft reports on groundwater and surface water options. So we have our water committee meeting tomorrow, Susan, and we'll be touching on kind of where we move forward from there. And then when we look at kind of one of the big projects coming up in the next few years is that North Reservoir actual replacement. So it was flagged last year as needing to be replaced in the next few years. First step of that is looking at the conceptual design. We've reached out to a lot of suppliers of tanks, fiberglass tanks, and there's issues with the size of the tank. So we have to look at kind of what we're going to do to ensure that the replacement still meets the amount of pressure necessary to push the water through the system. So there are a few options available. A few kind of interesting options. One is potentially building it up 8 feet on concrete. So you still get the ultimate, you have a lower tank height, but you still have the same height. So you're seeing the same pressure through the system. So a couple interesting things there. I will flag as well, within all our systems, asset management is a priority in 2025. And one of those things in asset management is bridging the gap between your operating budgets and your capital reserves, and making sure you're collecting enough in operating to put forth for capital for future years. So Beaver Creek will be doing a rate review. We haven't really adjusted the rates there since 2022. And we really want to keep up with, just want to keep up with the cost of living. So that's kind of a review there. In Millstream, we'll be doing the same thing. Banfield, we have had a rate review in 2023, so we won't be adjusting that one this year. We'll be coming back next year. So just touching on that as well. Banfield water system. So Banfield, a big project that started in 2024 and will continue in 2025 is the submarine line replacement. So the submarine line running from east to west Banfield delivers potable water. We're well in the stages of getting our permits through, and that's kind of where we're at right now is Department of Fisheries and Oceans. There's a rather large permit that needs to be done to ensure environmental concerns are protected. So It's typically, takes months to get this application in, and it's like a 6-month process for them to review. It's been fantastic that the board has sent a letter in, Huu-ay-aht First Nations has sent a letter in to ask DFO to expedite the process, which is fantastic. We are in conversations with DFO about that, about what can we do to make sure we expedite this process, because we really want to get this line replaced before the summer. It's huge economically. We have a number of repairs on that line, another one potentially taking place today. So it's one of those things that we are looking to get replaced ASAP. So we are working closely with DFO. And again, thank you to the board for having the foresight to get that letter out. A big project in 2024 that was the control panel upgrade. We had an archaic, and I mean archaic, control panel there. It faltered in late 2023, almost caused a huge shutdown of the system. But we have had that replaced, and we're seeing huge increases in operational efficiency there. 2025, other than the submarine line, we're looking at the reservoir cleaning. It's been a while since we had them cleaned, so we have 2 reservoirs there, and we'll have them both cleaned. We're looking at a long-term kind of financial plan and asset management. We talked about that. So these all work together, and then leading from those is kind of that capital replacement plan. So now that we've had the big piece of infrastructure replaced, we can start to look at, okay, where else within the system are we able to make upgrades and renewal, replace long-term sustainability? Millstream water system. So Millstream's one of our smaller water systems. We have 43 properties there. We have 50 paying connections. It's also unique in the fact that there's not a property tax, that is a parcel tax, sorry, collected for the water system. So this is where we really need to look at our operating budget and making sure we're sustainable, long-term, collecting enough funds in that operating budget to put away for the capital reserve. 2024 saw a lot of staff time, higher than typical staff time due to a leak in the system that we chased for a good part of the year. Finally, we did bring in the Pacific leak locators, and where we thought it was, they were able to pinpoint exactly where it was, and they came in and there was a large leak there. So in late December, early December, actually it was December 12th, we did this repair. We have replaced, you see that's them in there, replaced old AC. It was 4-inch, so we put in a 6-inch. We replaced 4 valves, and we put a new hydrant there. So we increased the fire flow, and then we've also increased and ready for future main upgrades. We have a report going to the West Coast Committee talking about rate review, asset management. Again, that will be coming up next week. 2025, we have, and again, I touched on a meter grant application for installation and purchase of meters for the system. There'll be more touched on that in today's board meeting. So that was submitted. We've put a call out system in the budget for operators. So we have, again, staff time in 2024 was higher than usual. This will allow for our system operators to be notified when there's an issue with the pumps or the filters and they need replacement. So they don't have to go by and check every day. They'll get the call out when something's going wrong. And then again, that investigation, asset management plan, rate review for the system. It's really one of those water systems where we need to replace it ongoing. We need to make sure we're putting the necessary funds away. So that will be looked at this year as well. And I'm going to stop now. We're down to 3 potable water systems. Just ask if anybody has any questions.
Does anyone have any comments or questions? Director Sparrow.
Thank you. As far as 4321, which is part of Beaver Creek's purview when they look for alternate services, how does this affect the other Millstream and Banfield systems as the government pushes down more? Have they talked about 4321 for the smaller systems yet, or are they just going to leave it for the bigger systems?
And a good question. For Millstream water system, the smaller water system, we are in close contact with Island Health regularly about the necessary treatments and filtrations for the system. We've recently put in UV treatment there, so we do have UV and chlorination and filtering there. So, we are meeting what we need to do for the smaller systems, and everything that we have been in communication with Island Health, they're happy with the system. The water quality at Millstream is looking good for right now.
Any further comments or questions? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Director Siga, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, you mentioned the software for monitoring the meters needed to be upgraded. And I'm wondering what kind of monitoring, like, is that done through satellite link?
No, and through the chair, so these are our water meters in Beaver Creek. We read these quarterly and that's what we base our consumption rates off of. So we actually go out with radio reads. It's not through satellite, and we do it all with a piece of handheld equipment. And we bring it back to the office, we download it into the computers, and that's what's used to generate our quarterly water bills.
Okay, so the meter reading is fairly labor intensive. So does that mean that there will be an increase in operating budget with the installation of the meters?
And through the chair, Director Siga, it depends upon the type of meters. So there's in Beaver Creek, typically it's a larger system than Millstream. We spend at most a day and a half doing the radio reads. So for a system like Millstream, if we were to install meters there and do the general reads, it would take less than a day, probably an hour or 2 hours, we'd be able to get those done. So there would be a small increase maybe, but I think in operational efficiency and unaccounted for water loss, we would more than make up the difference.
Taking into consideration the travel time to come out here, I mean, it's a lot quicker to get to Beaver Creek than it is to get to the West Coast. So, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm just considering the travel time. Or could that be done by somebody who works locally?
Yes, and through the chair, that would be the plan. We'd make sure that we took advantage of our operational staff on the coast to not necessitate the travel from Beaver Creek or Port Alberni.
Thank you.
Director Roth?
Thank you very much. Of course, water is my highest priority. I just wanted to note that we did have a water main break on Saunders Road the other day, and we called it in, and I think it was Keith was there within 5 minutes. It was really good. And when I drove past the next day, it looked perfect. So thank you. I'm really pleased.
And thank you for that. I think, and through the chair, it's really appreciated to hear things like that. And I know the guys, it was Super Bowl Sunday, right? It's evening and they get the call out and to be on site within 5 minutes to get the notifications and to have our contractors on site who aren't ACRD staff, but the guys can rely on them. They call them and they're there within minutes, hour maybe. It really, everything works together, part and parcel. And that's kind of what makes it special, right? It's a great crew and thank you for that.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your presentation.
And now I'll continue.
Sorry. Please go ahead.
Stuck with me a little bit longer. So we're just going to touch on Salmon Beach here. Community of Salmon Beach. I think as we move forward, the 2025, the year Salmon Beach. This is a picture from October, and we had the atmospheric river move through. And it's kind of one of those things when we touch about climate and the reality of what the next few years may look like. This may be more of a regular thing. This amount of rain that fell in about 4 hours on the coast was somewhat, from all accounts, and it's anecdotal, but they had not seen that amount of water come down that quickly. So when we look at, I touch on Salmon Beach transportation budget, in that budget, we're really focusing this year on the ditching, the water diversion plan to make sure that we have adequate sized ditching. We have had some culvert replacements get done within the system, so we're looking to continue with those. Make sure that we are thinking about water and diverting water in the correct path and making sure it has the path it needs to get to where it needs to go. We finalized and we're about 95% through our interior road upgrade. So we're improving the road from up to a recycled asphalt material. And I'll just say again, the water, when it came through in this storm, it really showed the benefit of that product because it washed away the top layer of gravel. And it was almost like it was a concrete asphalt surface underneath. It really packed down so well. So we've really seen great benefits from using that material within the community. Salmon Beach garbage service in 2024, we finally installed a wildlife resistant fence around the compound. So we've been working with WildSafe BC over the last couple of years, and it was nice to finally see that completed. We're going to continue to work with the community and with our solid waste team on bringing recycling to the community, and probably not in 2025, but in the next few years. That's one of the items we'll continue to work on. And then we are seeing increased hauling costs, primarily due to the volume of brush being left in the community. And so community members pay for that, and they're aware, and that's where those higher than usual costs come from. In sewage, we purchased a new pumper truck last year, so we'll be selling the older one. That's on the financial plan to do in early 2025. And then recreation, we're purchasing new picnic tables. That's exciting. And really everything else as we look towards the new playground design is that status quo within Salmon Beach is business as usual and building those reserves and working towards the future and making sure we're sustainable. Any questions on Salmon Beach before I jump through?
Dr. Siga, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just for everybody, a note of interest. I did get a picture sent from Salmon Beach, and the herring are spawning there now.
Very cool. Any further comments or questions? Okay, please continue.
We're going to jump through to custom transit, and I hope this is the last year I have to see this slide here. We have new stock footage of from BC Transit, so it's the last year I have to see my picture up there. The service details in 2024, it says 14,000 annual rides. That's kind of the average over the last few years. We reached a new surplus last year of over 16,000 trips delivered, which just kind of shows the system was at its peak. We introduced an expansion in January of this year, so we added 1,300 hours, not 13 hours, to support additional peak weekday trips. So those are those peak windows in the morning and the afternoon when everybody's going to their programs, everybody's coming back from their programs. We were at such critical mass there that it was nearly impossible to book a ride during those trip times. I want to highlight as well that we are introduced Saturday service January 1st. Early, and again, we don't have any actual trip data back from the first month. Anecdotally, though, the system has been enjoyed tremendously. It's been fully booked. A lot of people have been using it on Saturday to go shopping, to get out, and they might not have been able to previously. Handy Dart is one of those, in my opinion, it's one of those essential public services that really allows members of the community who can't otherwise get out to get out and enjoy the services. So it's really one of those critical programs that each community should have. With that expansion, the fleet increased from 4 buses to 6. This was really to satisfy BC Transit's fleet demands. And then when we look forward towards the next year, we will finally complete that regional transit study. We were just completing in the end of 2024, the last rounds of engagement. So we will see a draft report brought to the Alberni Valley and Bamfield Committee in the next month or two. And then we'll be able to talk about next steps from there. And then we'll jump over to West Coast Transit. This is a big talking point currently, and it's a big area of focus for me currently as we transition to the service being BC Transit run as of March 1st. We see a nice picture here, and this is the updated bus, the new fleet 2025 vehicle that will be in service. You'll see there's a bike rack on the front. Hallelujah, Tom. And then we will also see, it's the new BC Transit livery. So we'll see a kind of decreased maintenance costs in 2025 when we look at these new buses. I mentioned BC Transit. So we've been waiting for years for BC Transit to come to the table to run the service for us. And finally, they will be there. Provincial funding was confirmed basically when we implemented the service. So we are working hard. BC Transit staff is working hard to have everything in place. There'll be a public engagement, a opening ceremony at BC Transit will be doing on February 28th, a day ahead of service. So it's a new service for BC Transit. So they've been documenting kind of what needs to happen point by point as they work through a new service. There's been some things that have done well, and some things we can do better. I think, BC Transit really highlighted when we talk about budget process is start of a new service. They need to start that process a little bit earlier because we were a little bit rushed. But it's one of those things when you're implementing a new service or starting something new, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. A big benefit here of BC Transit coming to the table, and Director Siegel will be happy, is we'll be providing service to the community of Millstream. That's been long anticipated. There'll be a longer than typical service span. So the service span, we'll have 2 additional round trips per service day. So that'll be moving from the current 7 up to 9. And then cash fares will be introduced. We've been working hard with BC Transit staff to make this happen in a way that worked for both sides. And I think we've got there to an approach that will be it'll be beneficial. And I think the users of the system will appreciate the ability to use cash fares. They also have BC Transit will introduce their UMO fare paying service. So they'll have the ability to have reloadable cards as well, which is another benefit to the BC Transit and the UMO system. A big project for 2025, grant dependent, is the installation of bus shelters along the system. So currently, you know, when we work to implement the system, it was really get the wheels turning, get people from point A to point B. The infrastructure really was an afterthought. And now we're at the point, it's like, okay, let's make this service professional. So we're going to look to install some bus shelters at key places amongst within the system. And happy to answer any questions on transit before I move forward.
Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I absolutely love the West Coast Transit. I'm having an issue with the custom transit once again. For years and years, I've been looking at this service and the cost of it. I would like to know how many rides have been provided for Sprout Lake residents. Seeing that this is the biggest increase percentage-wise on my budget. So custom transit, so from just under 35,000 to over $50,000 is a huge increase to my area. And knowing that it's assessment based, it's a big hit. Years ago, I did a assessment as to what the cost was. And for one ride, a ride is one way into town or one way back home. It was over $700 through the taxation. So seeing that, and it was, you know, around $30,000 or something back in that 27 or something back in that day. Seeing it rise to $50,000, I really would like to see what the cost is per ride. Thank you.
Yeah, and through the chair, thank you for that, Director Cote. And I know that's an area of concern for you and has been. I think what I can confirm is that while the number of trips are fairly low for Sprout Lake, it's not that they haven't been delivered. It's that the residents are not asking to use the service. We had 54 trips delivered to Sprout Lake residents in 2024. And again, every trip that was asked for was delivered. I confirmed that with staff. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, BC Transit, can you give me the breakdown on what the percentage is, what we pay and what BC Transit pays per ride? Because that will actually play into this as well. So, back in the day when I was doing the comparison on cost, there was a complaint that I received from a resident from Sprout Lake that said they were refused service because it was such a far travel. I think that this is a very needed service and I want to support it, but I know I'm going to hear from my community about the cost of this. Thank you.
Yeah, and through the chair, and I appreciate your concerns and your sentiment. The cost sharing model with BC Transit is roughly 67% provincial, 33% local government, and it's like 66.69% to be exact, but it's about 67, 2/3 to 1/3.
All right, thank you. So I have Director Steer, Siga, and then Boyko up next.
Great, thank you. And through the chair, and I just want to right off the top, congratulate the work that Eddie and his team have done on this particular file, especially through the transition to BC Transit and the initiation of our previous service and the continued work that they are doing with with BC Transit on this. I can't overemphasize the amount of work and that has been done there. I have one and Eddie, maybe I don't know if it's coming up at West Coast Committee. There's just a couple of things around labor with PC Transit, et cetera, and maybe more appropriate in the West Coast Committee. But I did have just one question, just for clarity, on the budget area.
Oh, no, it's, you might need to turn off
We're
your
looking.
video. We didn't hear you at all, so turn off your video and just keep talking. We didn't hear the question.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, the unstableness of my internet. The contribution to the capital fund for 2025 is 764,000. And I'm just wondering, and I think I know the answer, but just for clarity, for the 2025, I know it's the beginning of the new service. And just some clarity on why it's 764, and because as you can see throughout the budget process, it is a reduced fee.
Sorry, I'll jump in for this one. So it is the contribution from the potential grant that we believe we are hopefully to get. I will note that in the plan that you are looking at right now, it is all in year 2025. But if you look at the capital plan, the grant's actually split between 2025 and 2026. That will be fixed for the West Coast Committee, but it is a flow of grant funding, potential grant funding through there.
Okay, thank you. Next up, I have Director Siga and then Director Boyko.
I just want to echo Director Steer's comments about how much the hard work on the transportation system is appreciated out here. And yeah, kudos to a job well done. And I look forward to, I appreciate the work on looking at the water systems, and I look forward to working with you on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have Director Boyko, and then we'll do Director McEwen after that, then back to Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Just to know about West Coast not West Coast, Custom Transit. I echo the concerns that Director Cote has. So I looked into the numbers for Beaufort a little while ago, and our usage is actually 0. Nobody in Beaufort actually uses the service. Whether that's because they don't need it, or we're too far away for it to be useful, or there's not enough education that exists, but our current usage is 0. And yes, it is going up 42% in this year's budget. So it's something we need to look at. Thank you.
I'm ready. Director McEwen, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, just wanted to say how excited we are to work with BC Transit with this transition for the West Coast Transit. And just wondering if anyone knows what the event on the 28th, when and where it will take place. Has there been any announcement about that from BC Transit?
Yes, and thank you through the chair. We're waiting for BC Transit to finalize location, and then at that point, they'll finalize time. There's a few locations they're looking at. I know they're working closely, Mayor McEwen, with Ucluelet Secondary School. So there are a few locations. As soon as we know for sure, we'll let everybody on our side know. We are letting BC Transit somewhat run with that as far as planning and organizing that, but we will ensure everybody on our side, director-wise, who needs to be there will be there.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. We'll go to Director Steer and Director Boyko. Do you still have your hand up?
All right. Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I just had a quick question around, and I meant to ask it, it was in here in my notes. On the fees and charges revenues in 2024, it was good to see there was $38,000 collected. For the 2025 budget, we're looking at a substantial increase to 60,000. The anticipation for that increased revenue, is that to the expanded level of service? So we're looking at, and as well as the different payment methods, is that why we're looking at significant expansion in those fees collected?
And through the chair, I think when we were looking at what expected revenues were going to be, again, it's a best guess. We're kind of anticipating service levels, Director Steer, to be more consistent over the year. So that will be it. We're going to be looking at, I think, the addition of cash fares will also help. And then the increase in service hours. We're adding in about 5,700 annual hours to the service, I believe it is. So, I think there'll be a big benefit there, and I think that's where we're looking at to get that expected revenue increase.
Yeah, as with any kind of alternate to kind of the car model for transportation, you do need to demonstrate three things. I think safety, consistency, and reliability and frequency, I suppose. So we're working on that. So I think that's really good to see. So yeah, I want to echo the praise for the work that's being done, especially since, this is something that was done under on the auspices of like the West Coast itself. This wasn't something that was, done provincially first. So I really want to commend the work that was done. Oh, Director Siga, please go ahead. Okay, no, please continue.
So I just want to touch quickly again on the proposed Bamfield liquid waste service that staff took to a service ascent vote last year. So this was the community of Bamfield decided against pursuing the community sewer project and moving forward there. But staff are going to continue to work on ensuring the health of the Bamfield Inlet and to ensure the long-term sustainability of the water quality there. So we do have contacts with Ministry of Health and Environment that we are working with, and we're flagging. It's kind of a complaint-based service, so any complaints on septic service systems that are potentially leaking are brought to us, and we will flag them forward, or they're brought directly to the ministry. So it's just a quick note there for Bamfield that, just because we're not moving forward with the sewer service doesn't mean we're not still concerned and care about the long-term sustainability of the inlet. Any questions there?
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please continue.
I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Michael, at this point. Thank you.
Through the chair. Hi, everyone. Michael McGregor, Lands and Resources Coordinator. Today, I'm going to go over regional parks, community parks, and Sprout Lake Marine Patrol services. So I will kick off with the regional parks. So this consists of the West Coast Multi-Use Pathway, the new section, Log Train Trail, Alberni Inlet Trail, China Creek Park, and Mount Arrowsmith Park. And it's funded throughout the entire region. 2024 highlights, we were in negotiations with the province for an updated Log Train Trail lease agreement after the Log Train Trail management plan was adopted. I think at this meeting last year, I anticipated that would take 6 months, and 12 months later, we're still talking a bit. So I'm not going to give a guess on how long it's going to take this year, but I'm optimistic that we will get some movement in 2025, and we'll be able to enact some of that transition and get the ball rolling on there. So also in 2024, we recruited and established a regional parks public working group with citizens and users from throughout the community. We did mostly just get applications from the Alberni Valley, so we don't have any representation from the West Coast or Bamfield at this time. That group's going to start meeting next week, and the board will see their minutes and potentially some resolutions coming towards them throughout this year. So that's exciting to see some movement on there. We also did some design and installation of some park signage throughout regional and community parks. We did focus on identification, information, regulatory signs in 2024. So in 2025, we're going to focus on more wayfinding, directional signage on linear paths and trails. So that's going to be a long-standing project, and hopefully we're able to, get them on the Log Train Trail, the Alberni Inlet Trail, and the MUP and stuff this year. So we also did begin a asset management condition assessment project for boardwalks, bridges, and wharfs. So some of the field work and first steps were done in 2024. We're going to finish that off in early 2025, and we'll have a report in probably second quarter of this year. Other than that, we still work with Mosaic and the province on a public accessibility of privately managed forest lands committee. That hasn't met in a little bit because there's a sticking point on an project that they're working on out by Great Central Lake, and it's in the lawyers' realm still. So until the lawyers between Mosaic and the province sort it out, there hasn't been much movement on there. But we will continue to meet and advocate for the ACRD for that section. Let's do some questions on regional parks before we move to community parks. Any questions there?
Yep, looks like we have a few online. Dr. Steer and then Director Boyko.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate it. And once again, this is going to be a service area that the district of Tofino has.
Oh no, you cut off right as you're getting into the question, Tom. You're gonna have to restart.
I'm sorry, I took the video off to hopefully, I apologize. Yeah, once again, it's showing me here, my internet is unstable. The issue for me, once again, the requisition amount that's being requested from Tofino and our participation in this service, it's one of those other areas that I'm going to have to be looking at what our contribution, maybe withdrawing from that. And the reason for that, when I looked at the total requisition and the amount that the District of Tofino is contributing to the regional park system is significant, almost 20%. And to be frank, the benefits of that service to us is minimal to almost non-existent. The multiple use path in our jurisdiction is actually funded through the part of the work that's done on the multiple use passes through RMI contributions. And so for the rest of and it's a significant part of the District of Tofino's budget is in our parks and trail systems internally. So it's an area that I'm going to be looking at to be withdrawing from, unless there's some way that we can redistribute the contributions. Really, the value of regional parks out on the Tofino end of the peninsula is limited to almost zero. So I'll leave it there just to say that I would seriously look at we'll be seriously looking at withdrawing from this particular service.
Thank you. I have Director Boyko and then Director Roth next.
Hey, Chair. With regard to the Regional Parks Public Working Group, will there be any director representation on there? And second question, I am looking forward to actually enacting the multi-use pathway on the Log Train Trail and making it multimodal. That has been well underway and hopefully we'll finish up soon. Thank you.
So yeah, I'd say this public working group, it was identified through the Log Train Trail Management Plan when that was adopted, and the direction at the time was to not make it a committee or a commission, a step below that for more of a user group. So it's not intended to have director representation there. There are members from the electoral areas and city on that part within the Alberni Valley at the moment.
Thank you. Director Roth.
Thank you. My question is about the process here, and it's from Director Steer's comments. Are incorporated and unincorporated areas able to withdraw from a regional service without board approval, or is there any process to that?
Daniel, do you want to, or?
There is a process, and so some of the areas that are being identified are, as is the case for planning, regional planning, I believe, are just part of the package you get. I'm not sure about withdrawal with regional parks. There is a process that has to be followed, and I would like, it's not a quick process. So certainly we'd have to receive official notice. And then I believe, I'm not looking at legislation, but no less than a 12-month process would be followed in terms of withdrawal. So we would have to come back with a report talking about how that could be achieved. And of course, talk about what the redistribution of costs would look like for the remainder of the participants.
Just one step further, is there a difference between the incorporated and unincorporated areas, or would it be the same?
Yeah, I believe legislation would have it be the same, but we have to double check all of that. So like, I appreciate the heads up from Director Steer, but we weren't prepared to talk about withdrawal of service. We're here to talk about numbers. So yes.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Are there any further comments or questions on regional parks? Okay, seeing none, please continue.
So I'll move over to community parks now, and I have 2 slides on this. This one focuses on 2024 highlights we have 5 community park services. One is Long Beach Communities Parks, which is mostly inactive, so no highlights for that. And in particular, the focus was on signage, asset management, throughout these services last year. Saw a number of improvements there. And then quick highlights for Bamfield. We saw the roof replacement for Lane Scott Centennial Park building. In Sprout Lake, we did renovations for the Cougar Smith Park bathroom facilities and the pump house building as well. Beaver Creek, saw some fencing and signage improvements at Evergreen Park specifically. Cherry Creek, we completed the field work for the boardwalk condition review, and there'll be some improvements for 2025 there. So looking forward for 2025 budget items. Again, we're going to continue with our asset management project and signage, some mapping. Bamfield, we're going to be focused on Grappler Inlet Wharf. In order to extend our tenure area there, the province has required some surveying and environmental work completed. So once that's done, we'll have a 30-year lease for Grappler Wharf. We also want to do some safety improvements to meet Transport Canada standards there. Sprout Lake, we're working on a couple different projects. One, the Faber Trail extension to Cougar Smith Park. We have some concept designs there and need to have some discussions with impacted property owners to move that forward. So that's on 2025's work plan. Dixon Park, the connection between the shoreline and the swimming dock there requires some repairs for safety. Beaver Creek, there's some invasive species management issues at Evergreen Park that we're hoping to address, partnering with the Broom Busters and the Backcountry Horseman Society as well. And then Cherry Creek, moving forward with the establishment of Cherry Creek access to Maplehurst Park and the number of steps that need to be taken to achieve that project. And then also, our boardwalk review will likely have some improvements required in 2025 once that comes in. And also a few just maintenance items and signage within the pathway at Cherry Creek Road and Maplehurst Park too. Any questions on community parks?
Director Sparrow, go ahead.
Thank you. As far as Maplehurst Park, I know they're logging on Consexus Road on the west side right now, but there's flagging tape apparently in the bush on the east side, which is close to Maplehurst Park. So I don't know how it's going to affect the area around the park, and also looking towards your pathway, how far they're going to come in, but that's something to look at. So, and as far as like the pathway, it's just kind of neat when you walk on that, the way it moves under your feet right now. So makes it interesting. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, let's move on.
And lastly, Sprout Lake Marine Patrol. So this is paid for or funded throughout the Port Alberni Valley. And their mission is to provide boating safety education at Sprout Lake and throughout the valley. 2024 highlights were a busy foot and boat traffic due to Hawaii Mars water bomber. The joke for the crew last year was that they were the unofficial water bomber tourism guide because there was a whole bunch of people there pretty much every day. Last year was also our first year of partnership with the BC Parks Foundation Ambassador Program for training for the crew. And this project is intended to build up youth and students in their training. So that did some great work for that. And this was also the first year where we offered a Sprout Lake specific map brochure that was updated, and that was well received. I'd say for 2025, this is our last year with the current agreement for grant funding with Transport Canada. That grant covers roughly 75% of the program costs. So the anticipation is that we will reapply for that grant, and what future years for this service looks like is really grant dependent. So we should have some more information on any changes to the service next year, but no big changes for 2025. Happy to answer any questions on this.
Any comments or questions on the Sprout Lake Marine Patrol?
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks for the presentation on all the parks and Marine Patrol. When would we be applying for the grant, the transportation grant? Thank you.
The last time we applied, the intake closed in October. And then we weren't notified until spring, February, March. So if that happens the same, we'll get it in as soon as we can, so that we do have some certainty on future years.
And is that a 3-year contract? Like it has been in the past? Thanks.
I think so. I haven't reviewed the terms for the grant opening this year, but I anticipate it would be 3 years.
Any further comments or questions? All right, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. And I'm going to go through a bit quickly. I was reminded of our time constraints. So, and we will be able to speak more in detail at the committees next week. So I'll talk a little bit about the Alberni Valley Regional Airport. So we do have non-tax revenues up this year from 120 in 2023 to 138 this past year. We have Wi-Fi at the terminal building. We made an application for the CanPass Border Service Agency. Unfortunately, that was denied, but they did tell us that we could do one-time clearances available at cost. We have reviewed the instrument approach procedures, and we started work on clearing trees in the OLS. Looking forward to 2025, we are proposing a minor tax reduction from 620,000 down to 610. We have our static debt repayment of 316,000 every year, which will be finished in 2047. We're hoping to get a grant to help construct the equipment shelter at the facility, which will just help to store our equipment and extend the life of those. We'll be finishing the OLS clearing, certifying the AWAS, which will all feed into getting NAV Canada attestation for our lowered instrument approach procedures. We also have crack sealing at the runway surface and fencing improvements planned. Jumping over to our other airport on the West Coast, we had a really basically a complex year this last year. We completed a lot of grant-funded projects through ACAP and BCAP, including the fencing project, acquiring a loader with some attachments, and construction of the pump station. We signed a 3-year memorandum of understanding with the Tloquia First Nation and did a small celebration, which was wonderful to mark. We have worked on new instrument approaches, which were published, which also allows for a lower approach, which is an excellent improvement for the site. And our non-tax revenues have continued to increase again. We are up from 214 to 375, and that is despite a passenger drop. And a lot of that is because we've been focusing on development of the land at the site, and we've had a lot of interest over on the West Coast on that. In this coming year, we're going to continue to work on OLS clearing and vegetation management, some painting and crack sealing. We're continuing with phase 3, maybe phase 4 of our water system. Again, this is all grant funded, although we do contribute out of the capital for that. And the last phase that we're wrapping up is the backup generator, which will make the pump station and water main upgrades functional. We will be completing the project that we've worked on last year, which is upgrading the septic system, which services many of the properties at the site. We have a grant in place for doing terminal building design, and we're hoping to again get grant funding in 2026 for new approach lighting. So we'll be doing preparations for that in 2025. Potentially moving forward with the airport master plan, and then also doing investment in some of our aging infrastructure, including the replacement of the roof on the Parks Canada building. There, that was fast, Terry. Any questions?
Any comments or questions on the airports? And it's my fault. I called a break. Director Boyko, go ahead.
I got a quick one here. Can you go back one page to the Alberni Airport? So just to be clear, the tax reduction last year was 640, 2024, sorry, 2023, 640, 2024, 620. Now we're looking at 610 moving forward. But just to be clear, the majority of the revenue for the Alberni Valley Regional Aerodrome does come from taxpayers directly in the Alberni Valley, correct?
That's clear, yes.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Next up.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen. I'm the Protective Services Manager with the ACRD. And I am conscious of time, Terry, as well, so we will move this along. I just wanted to start off by recognizing the key objectives in emergency management, because this really drives our work plan as we move forward and also affects our budget expenditures. So with emergency management, we are always working on building capacity and our resources through the purchase of supplies and equipment. This helps build our ability to activate a reception center and group lodging site if needed. And also there's improvements to our emergency operations center as well. Every year we complete training sessions and exercises in accordance with our emergency plan. So this year coming up will be no different. We will plan some training sessions with staff and volunteers. Public education is a big component of what we do, and we are focusing on improving risk perceptions in our community. We attend many community events, markets, and deliver public presentations to inform our residents on actions they can take to improve personal preparedness. And we work on several campaigns annually, including the Tsunami Preparedness Week, Emergency Preparedness Week, Hike to High Ground, and Shakeout. Volunteer recruitment and retention is a big component of our program. Volunteer management, it takes up a lot of time, but we do know that in case of an emergency, it will be community groups and volunteers that will be there to get us through. So it's really important to invest the time in our volunteers. And as always, we are looking at strengthening relationships with community organizations, provincial agencies, the community themselves, First Nations, to coordinate efforts and create efficiencies wherever possible. So when we look at the Alberni Valley Emergency Program, you'll notice that our 2025 priorities align very closely to what I just chatted about. So we will see that our priorities are focusing on improving readiness through training and adding resources and building our resource capacity through EOC and ESS readiness. We are dedicating effort towards our volunteer management and supporting our teams. We are striving to improve wildfire resilience through Fire Smart initiatives, and we're promoting personal preparedness and community resilience through public education and community engagement activities. We are adhering to legislation requirements. As you know, we received new legislation last year, so we are striving to meet the legislative requirements. We are working towards improving cultural awareness and safety in our region, expanding and strengthening relationships, and improving our crisis communication. I wanted to bring this slide forward because I really wanted to highlight some of the partnerships and the grants that we have. These are a number of the key grants, and you can see that each grant, there's a number of partners within each grant, and regional resilience is something we're really striving towards. It takes more effort and time to work with other organizations in a grant, and it is well worth it because we all know that emergencies are going to cross boundaries, and we need to be able to work together and build a more resilient region. So we have our Emergency Support Services grant, and I do have an asterisk beside that one because it is pending approval. But we are working with the District of Ucluelet and the City of Port Alberni. Also, our Emergency Operations Center grant as well. This year, we're working with the City of Port Alberni and the District of Ucluelet. The Emergency Communication and Public Notification Grant has already been awarded and approved to us. We are working with Sashot, Hoopachesset, the City of Port Alberni as well. Fire Smart, I have been here chatting about Fire Smart before, so we do have our same partners, and we're very pleased to welcome Hawaiian First Nations on board with us in our Fire Smart application this year, and that is worth $1.8 million, just a little over that at this moment in time is what our application will look like. And we're working on a cultural safety plan and working with a number of partners
in that Indigenous Engagements Requirement Fund. And so I just wanted to bring this to your attention and show you the partnerships that our grants are successfully working together with and some of the areas that we're focusing on. I also wanted to note that emergency management is relying heavily on our grants. And provincially, that is the model that has been set up. But I do have concerns around sustainability, around funding. And, you know, we are able to complete a lot of projects right now based on these grants that we wouldn't otherwise be able to achieve. And you can see that it's over $2 million that we're receiving in funding. And so I just flag that the provincial model is setting us up with a lot of grants, and then, which is fantastic. It gives us more opportunity. Grants are also taking a lot of time to complete, and with the reporting and whatnot. And if these grants then go away, then we don't have this kind of sustainability. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, because I do think the provincial model maybe needs to shift to a more sustainable funding sources, so that emergency management, if things shift or change, that we can still be resilient and protect our communities. With these grants, I wanted to bring a couple of large plans and projects that we have, and I've touched on it a bit in the past, but I do want to make mention that we are doing an emergency communication and public notification plan. This is to ensure timely, accurate, and coordinated information dissemination. Really excited about this grant, and we will be hiring a consultant here shortly to get this underway. But communication, when we look at emergency management, it's always the one thing that people say they didn't feel like they got enough communication. And so we're really working on building templates and trigger points and pre-written messages to help expedite messages and unite the messages, so that we're all saying the same thing within our region. So to try to reduce some confusion during times that may already be confusing during an emergency. The cultural awareness and safety plan, again, very excited about this plan. Really wanting to make sure that our recovery and response efforts are inclusive and equitable, and making sure that we're respecting cultural needs and values in different communities. So very excited to learn and build a document together that will ensure that we are, when we're doing emergency response and recovery efforts, that we are being mindful to not cause any additional harm. Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan. This will be a part of our Fire Smart grant, and the objective is to create strategic plan that assesses wildfire risk, and this is a requirement for the Fire Smart grant. And food security, emergency needs assessment, and livestock emergency plan. This was mentioned earlier a little bit with Alex Steyer. And we are working with the planning department on this one to build a plan that provides livestock and horse owners with an understanding of how to prepare and respond to emergencies. And I feel passionate about social capital and the importance of this. So I just wanted to bring this to light, because I really feel like in the case of an emergency, it's our relationships that are going to get us through. And so we spend a lot of time in emergency management, working together, training together, doing exercises together, putting in grants together. And this is all to foster trust and cooperation. And emergencies cause a lot of uncertainty and strife. And if we have these pre-established relationships, we're going to fare a lot better when push comes to shove. So we are moving forward with the concept and the approach of regional resilience, and really working together with all members within our region to build equity within our resources and our response efforts. And I will stop there before I get into Fire Smart and ask if there's any questions.
I think, oh, Director Cote, do you want to go first? Go ahead.
So the breakdown of the costs, who's paying into the Alberni Valley emergency planning? Thank you.
So the service details are the coordinated for Beaver Creek, Sprout Lake, Cherry Creek, Beaufort, and the city of Port Alberni.
So there's no First Nations that we're working with?
We're working with First Nations all the time and we're collaborating all the time. They are not a part of our emergency program. They have their own standalone programs.
Yeah, so there needs to be coordination, but that's integrated into a lot of the work that's happening already. So it's even the way that HOET does it in regards to, even though we're part of the board, we go through those systems as well. So Hoop Hutchison Deschamps would be doing the same things.
Thank you. It's a big jump going forward. So over $70,000 increase in the budget that I'm figuring out here. So it's another one of our big jump. I'm wondering if there's anything that we could do to cut back on that budget a little bit. I don't know how.
I can touch base on that. It is really that things had slowed down during COVID, and we've really been riding the wave of the surplus for the last couple of years. Last year, we had gaps in staffing as people moved positions. But yes, this was definitely one that jumped out to us as staff, and we have looked at, and we will bring a little bit more of a comprehensive discussion to next week's AB&B meeting, because we are recognizing, yes, yeah.
Yeah, even though it is a spike at that point, one thing I would state is that emergency planning and emergency management is something that we might not want to skimp on. There are other places where you could look for savings, but I think that every $100,000 we spend either through grants or our own money, and this is likely in the event of something happening, would save us $1 million, easy. So it's one of those things where I think preparation, management, these create value. It's like insurance. I wouldn't want to create more voids and gaps in our processes, but this will be down to whatever the committee conversations look like. Thank you. I have Director Sparrow and Director Siga.
Thank you. I'm going to echo what Director Cote said regarding the increase here. And we are working with the First Nations on grants. We're not working collaboratively enough that we can actually incorporate them all together and make cost savings. So maybe we should revisit this and say, how can we do this all together? If we're all in one valley and it's all one emergency, then we should all be in one pot to move forward, right? And we're doing that somewhat through our grant, but not doing that somewhat through our board discussion here. So that's something to look forward to.
Thank you. And Dr. Siga?
Again, I just want to congratulate the staff on coordinating the approach to emergency situations and emergency services. And I know it's not easy to juggle a whole bunch of different grants in order to accomplish like an overall objective like you have done. And yeah, I think well done and thank you very much.
Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, I still have
yeah,
a few more
sorry,
slides.
Yeah.
I just wanted to briefly mention FireSmart, and I know we've chatted about FireSmart in previous board meetings, but I just wanted to bring some statistics to your attention. Randy, our FireSmart coordinator, has been extremely busy the last 2 years. There's been significant growth in FireSmart, 138 home assessments thus far. And I feel like it's interesting to note that we're deep into winter here and the requests for home assessments keep coming steadily, despite the snow outside. So people are still interested in FireSmart. Public engagement events, we've been to 22, and we've actually had to turn some events down just because of our capacity. So looking forward to, with the new grant, if we can expand our staff capacity, we will be able to get out there a little bit more. And our curbside pickup has exceeded our expectations with 113 pickups. And again, requests still coming in. It's obviously lightened a little bit with the winter months here, but still coming in. So we're really looking forward to our next FireSmart application. It's actually over $1.8 million right now with a number of different partners. And as I mentioned earlier, very much passionate about the partnerships with FireSmart and regional resiliency. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback. Emergency support services, I just wanted to bring this forward as well. Our volunteer management takes up a lot of our time and resources, and I think it's well worth it. When we've had to open a reception center or a group lodging site, you know, we have 33 team members, but it doesn't take long before we're stretched and our capacity stretched. And so we're constantly training and putting efforts into volunteer management for retention purposes and recruitment and showing appreciation to build a strong team. One of the focuses in 2025 is to move into a bit more of the digital side of ESS. The province has a tool called Evacuation Registration and Assistance Tool, which is essentially a digitalized version of ESS. The paper version will never go anywhere. It will always be there. This is just another tool in the toolbox, so that if there is mass evacuations, we can process quickly or perhaps on the phone instead of in person. And so we are looking to, again, with our ESS grant, expand our supplies and our training for this coming year in 2025. Moving into Bamfield, we work closely with the Bamfield team. There's a team of 6 members there that work closely on emergency support services as well. And so we meet with them monthly and again, do the same thing we do with the Alberni Valley team, working on retention, building resilience, trying to put supplies in community. We're conscientious that, you know, Bamfield's close to us, but still far away in some ways. So we do try to get supplies in community so it's available to them, despite what the roads may be doing. So our priorities this year is to continue to work with the team. We've included Bamfield in our ESS and EOC grants. We'll continue to build local relationships and work on cultural awareness, and Randy will be there with the FireSmart program as well. So one of the challenges we have this year is just identifying some storage solutions so we can add more supplies within the area. So, and actually the emergency program coordinator from Hawaii First Nations is also now attending our ESS meetings as well and working obviously on FireSmart. So really excited to, again, build that team approach in the region. And lastly, Long Beach Emergency Program. Last year, we expanded the Voyant Alert and emergency notification system. Randy was busy doing FireSmart in the area. And again, we are always looking to expand resources into the region with ESS and EOC as well. And this year, we are working with the District of Ucluelet with ESS, the District of Tofino with EOC. And one of the exciting things to note is that we will be working on a joint West Coast Emergency Operations Center exercise together with Tofino and Ucluelet as well. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm not certain I have any questions that you can answer, but I'm going to ask one out loud. This is something that I had to do with something that Director Boyko said, I think several months ago now, in regards to how many hours of emergency supplies a household should have. Given the fact that we're an island, given the fact that a lot of our communities are remote, and given the fact that in the event of something big happening, we might not have the capacity to have a recovery in 3 days, are there guidelines that exist for communities outside of, say, the core Alberni Valley that state that maybe we should have more like 5 days or 2 weeks of supplies? I don't know that that's necessarily like written or law or guidelines or anything. It's just realistically, if a large earthquake were to hit this area, there are a lot of obstacles in the way. And especially given the fact that if it's not an earthquake or if it's a big fire, we might have to deal with alternate route complications because we don't have one, and so on and so forth. I don't want to speculate and I don't want people to go off, but it seems like that's something we may want to think on from an individual basis. Like emergency management, our emergency programs can do a lot, but the more prepared our people are, the better off I think everyone will be. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I will just comment that personal preparedness is the foundation of emergency management. The more resilient your own household is, then your community and your neighborhood is, the better we will fare in our larger community. You're absolutely right too with your comment around earthquakes. I had a conversation one time with a staff member with the EMCR, and they said, you know, if we have an earthquake and Victoria is impacted too, I wouldn't expect to see anyone from Victoria within 7 days, you know, to Port Alberni. So that just shows us that we do need to be self-sufficient. We've seen the road closure happen. And so the more amount of supplies, the more amount of readiness with training, with working together and with our resources, the better off we will be. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. That makes me think on the kind of conversations we might want to have with the Port Authority as well. I have Director Steer, then Director Boyko, then Director Cote.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, I support and echo those comments, Karen, and certainly Chair Jack as well. Very important. Just a quick question, Karen, around the proposed West Coast Emergency Coordinator position. I see that it is in the requisition, and I'm wondering if you can I didn't see it in the presentation, and I'm wondering if you can comment on that. Is it still a proposal? Is it because it is looking for a requisition for 2025?
I believe that's a negative requisition unless my weekend brain was challenging. I will double check for you. Hold on.
Yeah, it does show on my district proposed requisition as I only see it as a positive.
Okay, I'll get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Director Boyko and then Director Cote.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my comment a couple months ago was regarding the 5-day we had without power, and depending on the government for help and protection when they can't even get down the road is not really an option. So personal protection of every kind of level is important. Chainsaws, gas, make sure you got alternative source of heat. But I do agree that we should be helping ourselves and helping your neighbors. Thank you.
Director Cote.
Thank you. I just had a conversation with some of my community members on Monday evening. And we did, emergency planning was really high on everybody's mind with watching what's happening in California and making sure that our community is prepared. Which brings me back to always, I keep thinking that the Kurt's Crib that road being deactivated eliminates our emergency access. Really bothers me. Also working with the Vancouver or Alberni Valley Regional Airport and the Island Corridor, making sure that those emergency accesses are in place and that we're prepared going forward. Also working with our industry. So Mosaic, they do have community grants that are available. So I'm wondering if we could maybe tap into some of their resources for some of our emergency planning. I know that they do offer grants for specific, I'm not sure exactly if it's something that you bricks and mortar kind of thing, or if programming would fit into their eligibility for these grants. Thank you.
It is a challenge with the grants, with the eligibility and ineligibility, and we are tied a lot of the times on what we can accomplish due to that criteria. But what you speak of is, and I'll reiterate, is the importance of working together in relationships, whether it's with industry or, you know, other local authorities, because, you know, the property, there's a checkered pattern of who owns the property, and we do all have to work together for the common purpose. Our new legislation is helping because it's talking about critical infrastructure owners needing to have emergency plans as well as local authorities, and I do think that will help. But it's we are provincially lacking some regulations that kind of propel that forward, since it's hopefully coming. But having that standardized emergency preparedness across industry, local authorities and community organizations is really important. Yeah.
Quickly.
Thank you. Just working with my community and getting them prepared, I think is really important. With taxation going up to my area to over $70,000, really like to have something that we can say, here's our plan going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan?
It's a fair comment, and we certainly, we have many plans, I think is the response, and we can certainly share those and make sure the public remains aware of the volume of work and preparation that has gone in. But with every request that we have around emergency services, it's to remember that we're coordinating with 3 municipalities, 10 First Nations, and hundreds of different businesses across the region. And we pay for 2 staff to do that. So when you think of it, I know Randy's a third, but Randy's fully grant funded and attached to FireSmart. So these requests and the sheer volume of coordination that goes into the work that this department does is out of this world. We actually depend highly on volunteers that we have for ESS, and that's across the region. And I will say that for the West Coast, like Tofino and Ucluelet, they're also struggling because they have these programs run by staff that are sharing this work on a mixed table of desks. So we have 2 dedicated, one to ESS and Karen that coordinates everything. It's a very large volume, and we will have the discussion to see where we can potentially save more money, but it's to bear in mind that of all the departments, a cut in this one is virtually impossible. Short of saying, do we have any community volunteers that want to commit full-time work to stepping in, which really is not a good plan. And we love volunteers, but you know, when you're not paying somebody, you can't 100% depend on them because their home, their family will come first, rightfully. And so just make sure that I don't want to lose sight of that context, is that there's no fat in this department. So I'm also just acknowledging that there's lunch. Just want to flag, we have 2 choices. We could pause here and book another committee of the whole and come back. Or we could try and push through lunch. Perhaps that's a discussion that the chair can lead.
Yeah, I think there's 1 or 2 sections after emergency planning. Is that correct? General administration
And fire.
and fire?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do general administration next.
Okay.
And then see if we have enough time for fire, because that may be longer than. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Cynthia.
Okay.
Fred has the same.
Dr. Boyko, do you have your hand up, or is that an artifact from before? Nope, it's okay. Thank you, Cynthia.
Good afternoon. So there is only 1 slide for general government, so I will try not to take too long. So included in general government is administrative and corporate services, human resources, freedom of information, asset management, communications, information technology, records management, the Alberni-Claycoat Health Network, bylaws and policies, office supplies and equipment, and building maintenance. Some of the 2024 highlights include the review of policies and bylaws, which includes updating as needed, and the development and implementation of new policies. 2 that we were approved by the board include the grant and aid policy and the surveillance policy. There was also the purchase of the portable IT equipment for remote hybrid meetings. Our IT staff are currently in the process of testing the equipment at the different locations where this equipment will be used, and working to have a procedure in place and to train staff in using of this equipment. We also continue to work on the inclusive governance project. So ACRD is 1 of 5 regional districts who is doing this work with the province and received funding. So we received an additional 50,000 and continue to engage First Nations, as well as included our member participants on how First Nations could advance with participation on regional district boards outside of the treaty process. The province has also been working with JWR Business Group and are currently at the stage of working with their policy analysts to present options of what this could look like moving forward with legislative changes that would be required. The 2025 highlights, we will continue to review policies and bylaws. One that was requested by the board was to review the procedures bylaw, and our manager of administrative services will be bringing a report on what that work is going to look like. We will also be moving ahead with hiring a consultant to conduct an assessment of the ACRD records management system. That was a proposed initiative case that was presented earlier to the board. Another initiative will be to hire a part-time human resource manager and to continue the work on improving our cybersecurity. So in 2024, a cybersecurity assessment was completed. That assessment has provided a number of recommendations, and we will be moving ahead with implementing some of those recommendations in 2025. We will also be doing the work for the ACRD office building, which was approved by the board at a previous meeting this year. And that will be to do a comprehensive business plan for potential new office building. And this funding was already allocated in 2024, so does not require additional funding in 2025. And I think that wraps up some of the projects for 2025 for the administrative department.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for that? Director Steer, please go ahead.
Yeah, it is just a comment, and I will apologize again on this one, but I do want to point out for the district of Tofino where the requisition for this area, and I'm fully supportive of it, but it is in the tune of $431,000. And just as an example of where I keep responding around the inequities, my neighboring municipality down there, our requisition is 70% higher. And I understand why, the mechanisms, but it does point out the inequities. We have a very similar population base, and yet we are paying approximately 70% more for this particular service. And I just have to bring that up because we have to find a mechanism to make it more equitable. And I know there are limited choices. Thank you.
Before we dive into how this is distributed, I would just point out that property values in Tofino are more than twice that of their neighbors, and that's how it works. But I understand that there is concern there, but when somebody has something of value, that means they have access to wealth that they don't necessarily have in other places. And so that's a consideration for all property owners everywhere.
If I could just respond to that, Chair Jack, because this comes up continually. And the one thing about that, the increased value and the quote wealth, you can't eat equity. And one of the problems is that the assessment base, the way we do, and then the unrealistic assessments that Tofino faces doesn't equate with the ability for us to pay. And it does not answer the question about the equitable services that we require and that we pay for. And certainly just because we have a higher property value does not, in my way, equal the ability to pay or the equity of the system that we have in place. I recognize that it is the system we have in place, and that's why I've been looking at conversations around having to either find an equitable way. Our only other option then is to withdraw from certain services. And I don't want to get into the argument here, but I have to admit that conversation around the wealth that we as associated with our property values is a mute argument to me.
Thank you for your comments. Moving on. Are there any comments about general administration? Director Cote?
Thank you. A question around the IT equipment. It has been purchased, and is it being used? And I would comment that what Director Steer said is Sprout Lake is also very high assessments, and it's just the way it is.
Thank you for your comment. Any further comments or questions about this IT? Yeah, please go ahead.
So yes, the IT equipment that has been purchased, and it hasn't been used for a meeting yet, but they are currently working on testing it at the different locations where it could potentially be used.
Thank you. Any further comments? Director Roth, go ahead.
In regards to the IT equipment, would that be something that we could borrow for our town hall meetings, or is that something different?
Yeah, so we will be working on developing a procedure for how to use the equipment and what the process will be for making that request, but yeah.
March 2nd is ours.
I will let our IT department know.
Okay, so I'm going, before we go into fire services, which may go all the way to 1:30, I'm going to call a break for 10 minutes. And then we're going to decide whether or not we're even going to talk about it today. So let's all get our lunch and then we will decide as a board whether or not we want to hear the presentation and go into the conversation. But I do think that we may want to find some time on another date to have this discussion. Thank you. Yeah, well, you can move that when we come back. So I'm wondering if we can get a quorum of folks. I think the plan will be to defer the fire services presentation to the EA directors. I believe it would be presented at that committee, and then that can be incorporated through the board by recommendation. So with that, I'm wondering if we could have someone to move to do that. Thank you, Director Cote. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. I was going to say Steer. Okay, seeing none. Any comments? Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. I think that would conclude the presentation. I think we still need a motion to receive the presentation, or at least as much as we've had so far. Yeah, as amended or as presented. Thank you, Director Cote, and seconded by Director Sparrow. Any further comments? Thank you to staff. I think next time, on Director Sparrow's suggestion, we may try to do this on the off week on Wednesday, just so that we don't bump into this. So we still have the meeting at 10 and see where we get, but then we don't feel rushed if we want to get into conversation that way. With that in mind, I don't think there's anything else on the agenda. I don't know if there's any question period comments. So there doesn't appear to be any Zoom comments.
So there's no questions on Zoom and no questions received by email.
Okay, would anyone like to move to adjourn the committee of the whole? Thank you, Director Siga, seconded by Director Coots. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, motion carried. So see you all at 1:30 and